Welcome to the fifth day of this webinar series. And today we are going to talk about how to read a journal paper fast. The objective of today's session is to learn how and what you can do to improve your reading skills when it goes to reading a journal paper. Okay, so let's get started. Today there is a lot of content that I want to cover. So initially, I have broken down this session into kind of two stages. The first one is I will give you general or generic tips and tricks or suggestions on what you should do when reading a journal article. And the second part is I will go step by step, section by section, as in how you should read the abstract, how you should read the introduction, and what are the things that you should be mindful of when reading those specific sections. Okay, so let's get started. So tips on reading the journal paper. So first thing, that when you start reading a journal article, you have to understand or determine what you need to get out of that paper. Yeah. So what is the reason? What is the purpose that you are reading this article? So you have to have that thing clear in your mind. And depending upon what stage of research you are, this could be different. Yeah. For example, if you are just starting your research, you may want to try to understand the current state of research, what all research has happened in this space. Yeah, so you may want to kind of glance through the research article at that stage. But if you are, say, specifically looking for some information, when you are writing your literature review, your purpose is different, and you will have something else in mind, that I only need such and such information from this article, and I want to find that. So depending on the purpose, you will be looking for specific information from the research paper. Next thing is scan before you read. So that is a very important tip in a sense that when you get a research article, a journal paper, for example, it could be say 10 pages, 20 pages, depending upon which journal it is published in. So first of all, just have a scan, quickly scan the paper to get a sense of the structure of that article. And what are the key sections? What are the main sections that are outlined, that are covered in that journal article? So this helps you in understanding how the paper is organized. So from that point of view, it is very important that rather than directly diving into and reading the article, look at the structure of the paper. And once you do it for one paper, you will realize that more or less most journal articles have a standard layout, standard structure that they follow, and you will easily be able to know which section is where. Next thing is active reading. Engage with the text by asking questions and making predictions or summarizing key points as you read. So don't just read and then come back and make some annotations or highlight. As you're reading it, you can start annotating the paper. And not only that, you can also start thinking or criticizing or critically analyzing the paper or the section that you are reading. So that is active reading, and this is a skill that you will develop over time. So it may not happen right when you're reading your first article, but once you have done say 15, 20 or 30 articles, you will get a hang of doing this easily. Our next thing is very important, is to take notes. Yeah, so you can take notes either on the paper itself, or if you're reading the article digitally, you can leave comments or highlight the sections on the PDF, and that way, and scribble or make some notes on the side of the paper itself. So next time when you open the article, you will have a clear understanding, and you will remember, okay, when I was reading this paper, this is what I had thought, and I have made a quick scribble on that. Alternatively, you can make notes, say in Excel or in Word or any other note-taking app as well that you can use for taking notes. Depending upon your preference, depending upon your choice and experience, you can choose one or the other tools to help you take notes. Another thing that I have seen, and this is quite interesting, is sometimes I look at a research paper and there are so many things that are highlighted. Literally, it feels like the whole paper is highlighted, and then you wonder what is the purpose of using the highlights, because literally everything on the paper is highlighted. So when you are highlighting something, make sure that you decide what you want to look for or what you want to highlight, because then you can use that later on. Otherwise, if everything is kind of highlighted, it will be very jumbled up, and then the purpose of having the highlights will not be served. Break down jargon. Look up terms and concepts you are unfamiliar with. So keeping a glossary can be a useful idea. Or alternatively, as you are reading, you can start writing a section, which I recommend many of my students. And that section I try to call it as preliminary concepts. And the idea of preliminary concepts is that as you are reading, you are collecting these concepts that you don't know. And imagine when you are writing a thesis, and once you have written the thesis and somebody is reading your thesis, there may be these concepts that they are not familiar with. And because you have this section on preliminary concepts in your thesis, they can understand your thesis much more easily. So the process of collecting these concepts and writing them starts from day one, and you start adding that into your collection. And as you progress with your research at certain stage, you can use these preliminary concepts even in the literature review paper that you're writing, or any journal article that you write during your course of your PhD. And that will be one way to learn some concepts yourself, but also keep a record so that it can be used later during your thesis. Next thing is relate to what you know. So try to connect new information to what you already understand about the subject area. And this can be important because it will give you a sense of, I would like to say, a sense of confidence. Because when you see and read something that you already know, you feel that, okay, you have some understanding of the field, and you can benefit from that, because it gives you a sense of a feeling of a boost that you understand, you have some good knowledge about this field. So start relating to this. And one thing also you will find is, when you read one paper and then you read the second paper, if there is some correlation or connection, this is again the same thing, that you have read something in paper one, and then you read a paper, next paper, second paper, third paper, or 10th paper, and then you suddenly realize that, oh yeah, I had read this somewhere before, and then you can relate that to your knowledge that you already have. Use additional resources. So don't hesitate to consult additional resources or educational materials to clarify concepts presented in the paper. So many a times what happens is, a lot of students struggle that, oh, I don't understand this concept. What have they written? I don't understand this equation, or I don't understand this model or a framework. What can I do? Where can I find some help to guide me through that, so that I can understand this paper clearly? So back in the day, you would have to search online for other resources and look for additional information and try to understand the concept. But now with generative AI, you have the option to ask generative AI, like ChatGPT, for example, to explain you some concept that you don't understand. And it has become very easy. So if you're reading a paper, you don't understand something, you quickly go and ask on ChatGPT that, I'm reading this paper, give the title of the paper, and say that I do not understand this concept. Can you explain it to me? And it would be quickly done. Our next thing is to summarize the paper. When you are reading a paper, overall you can think that, or you can find that, all right, this paper that I have read relates to so and so theme in my literature review, yeah, or in my research. So if you have identified certain themes that you think your research paper should have, then you can categorize these papers, that okay, this paper goes in this basket, this paper goes in that basket. So I try to think of your research collection as a collection of different information, and these information boxes, you can name it. I try to call them as buckets of information, and you can say bucket 1 is about this, bucket 2 is about this, 3 is this, and 4 is this. And as you start reading the papers, you realize that okay, this paper kind of fits in bucket 3, so let me categorize them or put it there. Or when I'm writing the summary, I mention that okay, this paper is related to bucket 3, and that will be the summary part that I can do. Other than summary, you can also write a critical evaluation of that article in your own words. So you can start thinking critically. It's not just summarizing but also criticizing. And a lot of times, in my opinion or in my experience, I have seen that students get confused in when they're doing lit review, that they start to summarize the research. They do not criticize the research. But a literature review, as the word review itself says, you have to review. It is not a literature summary, right? It is a literature review. So you have to give your own opinion or your own analysis of the same concept or whatever you have read in that article. Next thing is discuss with peers. This is also a very interesting idea. For example, if you are in a group of researchers, and you have, say, in a lab or a research center, there are other PhD students, other scholars who are working on some different or a related area, not completely different. But then you can go and discuss the paper with your fellow scholars and get their opinion, or tell them that this is what I thought the paper is about. What do you think? You know, that kind of conversation you can have with them. The next thing that you can do is apply what you have learned. So consider the information, what you have got, and apply it in your own research. And you will realize that this is one of the very important steps in when you are doing your research. Is as you are doing your research, when you read a particular paper, you think that okay, this part of the paper is interesting, I can use something like this in my paper or in my research. So you pick up that part and you kind of put it in your collection, you know, and then you can say okay, I will apply this or I will use this in my research or in my writing, and which is why I have selected and kept it separately. So you can start applying your knowledge as you progress. Another thing is review regularly. Periodically review your notes and summaries to reinforce your understanding and to keep the information fresh in your mind. So what may happen is, say if you plan to study 5 papers in a day, right? And you read the paper, you summarize them, make some notes, and then you keep it. Next day you do another 5 papers, and next day you do another 5 papers. But what may happen is on the what you have read on the first day, you may try to may not remember on the day 3. So before you start summarizing, you can go and review quickly what you read the previous day. That way, this information that you have will remain fresh in your mind. Next is allocate time wisely. See, when you are doing your research, one of the hurdles or the biggest challenge that students face is they cannot manage their time effectively. And then what happens is they feel like, oh, they are just running out of time, or they think that, oh, what did I do all day today? I didn't really achieve much in this today because you did not decide how much time you are going to spend on each paper. So if you keep a target that I'm going to skim read this paper and I will allocate say 30 minutes for this, to read the paper, find some important information, summarize it, criticize it, and done. Yeah. So if you can keep a target, a timely target, that to complete this task, I'm going to allocate X amount of time. So that way, you know that whether you have achieved your target or you have not. So keep that in mind, manage your time wisely. So if you imagine, I told you 5 papers a day. If you keep 30 minutes for each paper, in 2.5 hours, you can finish your target for the day. So if you started in the morning, say start at 9 o'clock, by 10, 11, 11:30, you should have finished reading those 5 articles. So if you keep that kind of a target, it will help you to manage your time. And then you have the rest of the day to do something else. So keep a very close eye on how much time you are taking to read a paper. What you will notice is when you are starting this thing at the very beginning, when you are, if you are new to research, then you may probably take a longer time. But as you progress, as you build up that skill of reading a research paper, this time will gradually reduce, and something that used to take you 1 hour maybe will take you 30 minutes, and maybe in the next few months maybe you can just finish this in 15 minutes. So reading a journal paper is also a skill that you have to develop. Another strategy is you can try to read a complex paper across multiple sessions. So you don't have to just read it all in one go. You can decide, okay, maybe I'm just going to read the methodology section of this paper for now. And then you read the methodology section. And then you pick up another paper and read the methodology section from that paper. And then you can compare and contrast the two methodologies and see how they are different, or what are the similarities or differences between those two articles. So this is also another strategy. Next, I would suggest is create a system. Develop a system for organizing papers and notes, whether digitally or physically. So like I mentioned, either you can put those papers, open the papers in PDF and start annotating them, or you can have a printout of the paper and physically write on this. So this could include, like I've said, categorizing papers by topic, by date, by research area, by why you are reading this paper. Where do you think this research will fit within your whole research framework? The next thing that you can do is to practice regularly. Emphasize that, like with any skill, reading and comprehending journal article improves with practice. So the more you read, the more skillful you become, and you have to have a regular schedule for reading and analyzing paper. So keep that in mind, that your daily target is to read X number of papers. It could be 2 papers, it could be 5 papers, doesn't matter. It could be 10 papers as well. Depending on your skillfulness, how skilled you are to quickly learn or read the contents of one journal paper. So keep that in mind. Okay, so this was the first section of the video of the webinar, where I wanted to give you some basic guidance and advice on reading a journal article. So the next section, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you or tell you how to read a paper section by section. Okay, so a research paper starts with a title. It will have abstract, introduction, literature review, methodology, findings, conclusion, discussion, and so on. So from each of those sections, there is some information that you want to glean, some information that you want to extract and understand and learn. Yeah. So let's look at those step by step. So let's start with the title. So read the title of your paper to get a sense of the study's focus. What is the paper trying to achieve? So by reading the title on many occasions, you will get a good understanding of the purpose of this paper. What research is it trying to do? What question it is trying to answer? The next thing that you can, the next thing to look for is the abstract. So read the abstract to find the research question, objectives, methodologies, results, limitation, and conclusion. So typically, a well-written abstract should have all this information clearly mentioned in the abstract itself. And that is one way you actually infer the quality of the research paper and the quality of the content that you can expect from the research going forward, from the research paper going forward. So your objective when reading the abstract is to collect this information. Yeah, research question, objective. Sometimes it could be either or. So it could be either research questions or objectives, but one of them should be there in the abstract. Next is methodology, then results, limitations, conclusion, and so on. So this information should be there in the abstract. And when you are assessing whether to read the complete paper or not, abstract is your guiding point. So if you can find all this information very easily in the abstract, you will be in a better position to decide whether to read the rest of the paper or not. Next is think critically and assess if the conclusions are justified based on the results and the methods, and assess whether there is any potential bias. So remember earlier today I told you that when you're reading a research article, you're not just summarizing it, you are analyzing and criticizing it. So here is an example of how you can do a critical analysis, right? So what did I say here? I mentioned think critically and assess if the conclusions are justified based on the results and the methods. So they have got some conclusions from their study. You can judge whether those conclusions actually make sense or not. And you can relate that to results and you can relate that to the methods. And if there is any potential bias in this situation or in this study, you can make a note. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect at this stage, right? You are reading the paper for the first time. If any ideas, anything that come to your mind, just make a note, write it down, and later you can always come and cross it if you think that is not right, or if your understanding of their study is improved. But as of now, when you are at the abstract stage, if something comes up, some questions comes up that you are not very clear, make a note. There's no harm. Many a times we will also use abstract as a screening tool to decide whether to read the full paper or not. And this typically we do when we are doing literature review or a systematic literature review. And we realize that if we have a collection of say 100 or 200 papers in our first round of search, there has to be some way to kind of simplify or filter these papers, and so that we can work on a smaller collection for our literature review. This is where abstract comes very handy. So if the abstract explains the research question very clearly, their method, their approach, their findings, then you can use that as a way to decide whether to include this paper for further study or not. So that is one way, another use of abstract. Okay, now the next section is introduction. What are we looking in the introduction section, right? So first of all, when I get a research article to read, I will first skim through. I'll just flip the pages and see, okay, how long is the introduction? Is it one page? Is it half a page? What do they have any subsections within that paper or not? So that is the first kind of skim through to get the idea, get the context of that research paper, identify what research objectives they have listed or they are trying to answer. Next is look for a clear statement of research objectives, and this is very important because unless you get a understanding, a clear idea of what is the research objective, what they are trying to achieve, the rest of the paper is irrelevant, because if you are researching on a specific topic and this paper has come up through your search results, through your literature search, you need to assess whether the research objective or research question that this paper is going to study, is it relevant or related to the research that you are doing. So that assessment has to be done, and which is why you need to identify the research objectives or research questions very quickly or through that introduction. So understanding what the study aims to achieve or aims to answer is important to assess whether the paper is relevant for you or not. And if it is not, then you can skip at that stage. But if you think it is relevant, it is useful, you can continue further. So in the introduction section, you can also take a note of some key terms or concepts, like I mentioned earlier, preliminary concepts, definitions, if there are mentioned. This is where you will find introduction. Many a times the key definitions are covered. So you can either highlight it that, okay, this is the definition that is covered here. It may be useful for me when I'm writing my thesis or when I'm writing my paper. So either take a screenshot, screen capture, or just highlight if it's on a printed paper that this is the information that I think is useful for me and I may be using it later. Next, identify statements that mention the research significance. So this is another thing, because when you are going to write, you also need to have a section that talks about your research significance. So if you have read multiple research papers and kind of picked up the research significance on how they have written their research significance, it will be a learning exercise for you. You can learn from how they have written, which is why reading is important. The more you read, the more you learn, and the more better your writing will be in the end. If the introduction also talks about the importance, why is this research important? Why should it be done? If it was not done, what would have happened? That kind of thing is also equally important to pick up from the paper when you are reading it. Next thing that introduction sometimes mention is the impact that it could have on the research field, on practice, or like the practical use of this research, or how can it inform policy making or policy design. So all these things are very useful information that you can pick up from introduction. The introduction also gives you a structure of the paper, that the second section is about lit review, third is about methodology, and so on and so forth. So sometimes it is also good to quickly scan through this information to get a glimpse of the rest of the article. Next, you can also do is check the citations mentioned in the introduction for a deeper understanding of the context and the background. So this can be something useful in the earlier stages of your research. So if you just started to read articles in your field, this may be a good way to kind of start collecting the citations or references, and then you see, okay, I need to read this paper, I need to read this paper, and so on. So that is also one thing that you can infer. Many a times in the introduction, a lot of common references you will find, that many papers will in the introduction will use the same references. Maybe it is like a quote, or maybe it is like a historical story that they want to cover in the introduction, how the field kind of emerged earlier on. So these common references will be there, and you can also use them. There is no harm in doing that, but I'm saying that this kind of information is also can be fetched from the introduction. Next thing is the literature review. So we have finished title, abstract, and introduction. Now let's see what we are looking in the literature review section. So when you are reading a literature review section of a paper, you have to be there are different things that you have to consider. Are you reading a systematic literature review paper? Then the whole paper there will be a section called as prior literature review. So focus on that. That is the literature review for this paper. If you are studying an empirical paper, which means they have done some studies, got some results, and reporting the findings, the literature review section can be either after the introduction, or sometimes it is after the results section. So the positioning of the literature review section depends upon the field in which you are. So if you are in a specific field, you will know that what is the tradition, that the literature review is written after introduction, or is it written after the results. So have a look at that, and wherever it is, pick up that section. So when you are reading literature review, what are you looking for? You are trying to understand historical context of this research. So who has done what research in the past? And if you have to do a chronology of events, or kind of map the progress of the research from, say, the earliest paper published to the most recent paper that has been published, you can kind of imagine like a research progress. This was the first paper, this was the second paper, the most important paper came around in this year, and many researchers used this research and built up some more literature, and so on. So that understanding historical context is good, and many papers will mention or will have the historical information at the start of the literature review section. You can also use this to assess methodological trends. What do I mean by that? A typical research question can be answered using various research methodologies, right? So the lit review section should mention, I don't say it will mention, but it should mention that this and this research in the earlier stages, they used qualitative research methodology. After a few years, when there was sufficient evidence, then they started doing some quantitative research, and then mixed methods, or design science, or different methodologies will start to come up in the literature. So you can mention that. This is something that you can pick up when you are reading a review paper. Evaluate the quality of sources. This is also important, and which I do quite often, because if I see a paper being referred, I just flip back, look at the reference list, and see and assess whether that paper is published in a good conference, or if it's published in a good journal or not. And you can use this to summarize your key findings of your paper as well. Next thing that you can start connecting the dots is, what is the connection with the current study? You can critically evaluate. The evaluation can begin here. So if the paper that you are reading is about a specific topic, and then the literature review section of that paper that you are reading, does it connect very well to what the paper is about? Many a times you will see that people will not really spend a lot of uh, effort in writing this section very thoroughly or connecting it properly with the research objective or the research question. And when this is not done, it is easily picked up by reviewers. So when you are reading a research paper, you're not only reading it, but you are also learning on how you should do a proper job. When you are writing your paper, these are some of the mistakes, or these are some of the errors that you should avoid. Next, you can understand or think about the gap in the literature that this research aims to fill. So the purpose of having a good literature review is to show that this research has happened, this has happened, this has happened, like a lot of research has happened. However, this bit here is not happened. This, nobody has looked at this aspect. This is the research gap. So to prove that a research gap exists, your literature has to be thorough. So when you're reading a research paper and you do not get that feeling that this literature review is deep enough or in depth, you can easily figure out it is very superficial or if it is very thorough and very good quality. So having that and understanding that gap from what that research tries to fill, if it doesn't come out from reading the literature review section, this is something that you can criticize. That is an example of a criticism that you can make when you are evaluating a paper. All right, the next section that we are going to talk is methodology. So you can see the order, introduction, abstract, introduction, lit review, and now we are going to methodology. So when you're reviewing the methodology section, there are two things here, at least broadly speaking. One is you are understanding what methodology they have used and whether it is an appropriate methodology for the research question. See, again, this is a point of criticism. Here you can give your opinion. You can say that this research was done using quantitative approach, but maybe a qualitative would have been a better way or better approach to handle this research question. You can give your reasons why you think that it should have been this way. Or when you look at the methodology justification, the paper, if it does not give a convincing and sound justification for their selection of the methodology, that is again something that you can pick up on and comment or criticize. So you understand that it is not just reading and understanding what they have done, but at the same time in the background thinking and analyzing in your mind that is this right, or it could it be done in a better way. So always keep that thing in mind. So consider the study design, sample size, and the techniques they have used. Are there any biases or limitations to the methodology that they have used? Next, you can look at the type of research design that they have used. For example, experimental, observational, qualitative, quantitative, and understand the implications for the study's finding. So, like I mentioned, is this the right methodology to answer this research question? Yeah, so the connection between the research question and the methodology should also be extracted, and you need to analyze whether the approach and the research question if they match or not. Then you can look at the sample size, for example, or the selection criteria. If the study mentions that they selected 100 participants and it was a mix of students and professionals, then the question that should come to your mind is this the right mix of participants or to answer the question that they have asked in the for their research, so that kind of criticism, step by step, section by section, is what you need to do. And this doesn't have to happen on pen and paper, or like you have to type everything. But as you're reading the paper, you have to start thinking about this. You have to kind of, in the background, question these assumptions that you have, and try to justify or try to make an assessment whether what they have mentioned in the paper is good enough, or are there any loopholes, or are there any biases that you can find. Next thing that you can study is the process that they have followed when conducting the research. For example, data collection. When they have done the data collection, what approach did they follow? Did they just do a random sampling or a convenient sampling, or did they do snowballing? So understand different data collection strategies that they may have used. Next, you can think about whether they have done some data cleansing on the data that they have received. Sometimes the data may be incomplete. So what approach or what technique they have used to fill up that data or synthesize that data artificially, the one that was missing, and so on. What was the analysis, the method they chose or they used? Was that method appropriate for the kind of data that they have collected, and so on? So these are all things that you can start to comment upon when you are reading an article. Next, you can comment about the tools that they have used. So if is this the right tool or a suitable tool for analyzing this kind of data, or was there something else? Or maybe there is a new technique, a new AI tool that has come up that can make this process even faster or more convenient. If they have not used it, you can mention it as a suggestion that others can kind of benefit. So they cannot do anything about it now because their paper is published and the data has been analyzed. But in your paper, you can say that we analyzed our data using these advanced AI tools and techniques that are available now. How was the data analyzed? Were the analysis methods appropriate for the collected data and the research question? So I covered this already, so I'll skip this. Does the study mention, okay, this is important, ethical approval. Whenever you are doing research, whenever you're involving humans as your study participants, you need to have ethics approval in place. All top universities around the world follow this very strictly. It is very, very important. I cannot stress how much important this is, because if you do not have ethical approval and you conduct the research, your research could be of no value because nobody will publish your research. So you have to be very careful on this. So if the paper, when you read it, it does not mention ethical approval code or approval number, then it is a big question mark, and you can actually approach the authors and ask them whether you have the ethical approval in place or not. You can also be critical and question the methodological choices, like I mentioned already, that whether the method that they used was good and suitable for the research that they are trying to conduct. Sometimes it is also a good idea to look at the diagrams or flowcharts if they are presented in the paper, to get an understanding of some complex processes that may not be very easily understood just by reading the text or the paragraphs. So in those cases, look at the diagrams, and sometimes it is much easier to infer information from such documents, such figures. Okay, so the next section is on findings. So in the findings or the results section, what you're trying to look for is, this is a research question. Were they able to answer that research question through the findings that they have mentioned or they're mentioning in this section? Understand the data presentation. Results can be presented in text, tables, graphs, figures. There could be different ways in which results are presented, and sometimes it is repetitive as well. For example, the results may be there in the table, but they are explaining the results from the table in the paragraph section. So you can either read the table thoroughly or read the paragraph section thoroughly, and so on. But what you're trying to understand is whether the information presented in that findings or the results section actually supports the research question that they have identified and that they have selected. And if you cannot make that connection, or if the paper does not give a convincing argument on how this relationship or connection exists, then it is something that you can pick up from the paper and infer that no, this is not very well articulated or answered in this paper. Interpret figures and tables clearly. Check the legends and footnotes for explanations or symbols, abbreviations, and any statistical measures that they may have. So the findings section of the paper will be the most varying section across different research papers. Yep. Depending upon which field you are, the results or findings section can be written differently. So look for basically what we're looking for is, if this is the research question, have they answered it clearly? Is the answer acceptable? Is the answer clear and justifiable? Does it make sense? That kind of thing that we are trying to gather. Next, you can see is assess the reliability of the results and how they are validated. So you got some results, but how do we know that we can rely on these results or not? So there are standard tests in the literature that researchers have to use to prove that their findings are reliable and trustworthy. So that has to be mentioned. That should have been mentioned in the paper. If it is not mentioned, that is something that you can pick, and you can say that although the results are presented, but the validity is missing, and that is what you can then report, or that again becomes the point of your critical analysis. Next thing is to consider how the methods that they have used in the research can influence the findings. So is the method biased? So is the selection of the method appropriate for the research question that they have identified? And is there some form of convenience that they have assumed or considered, that by following this methodology, it may be easier for me to answer the question or not? If something like that happens, something like that you can identify or pick up, then I think it is a very good point to mention in the critical evaluation. Next thing is avoid jumping to conclusions just by reading the findings. Yeah. Avoid drawing your own conclusions until you have read the discussion part of this section. What happens is, a lot of time when we read the article, we are thinking from our point of view, which is good. I'm not saying that is wrong, but when you are reading the results, it is good to give the author the opportunity to let them tell us or give us their interpretation of their results, which is normally done in the discussion section. Yeah. So wait till the discussion to kind of see what do the authors have to say about the results that they have got. Look at how the data is presented and analyzed. Are the conclusions supported by the data? So the data presentation is again something that you can pick up and comment upon. So you can see what I'm trying to get to here is you can analyze and any journal paper or a conference paper on many levels, and each of this will give you something to write about. So anyone who is kind of struggling to think what is it that I can write about when I have to criticize a paper, this is going to be your checklist. All these slides that you can see are kind of questions that you can ask yourself while reading a research paper. So let's take an example. Look at the data presented and analyzed. Look at how the data is presented and analyzed. Are the conclusions supported by the data? So if this was the checklist, what would you do? So you would look at the results section and say, how is the data presented? You can say the data is presented in tabular format, or it is analyzed using specific tools or techniques or something like that. And is that the right way to do it or not? So keep that in mind. Keep that all these things that I have here in the slides are kind of filters that you can apply. So imagine you have a sieve, you pour this research paper from this, and outcomes of this is answers to all these questions that I have raised in these in these slides. So look at these slides over and over again repeatedly to see what is it that I'm trying to pinpoint here. And these, I think there are probably 60-70 slides in today's session. So there are that many things that you can use to comment or criticize one research paper. And imagine doing that for multiple papers. You will have a lot of information that you can write about. So anyone who is kind of struggling and thinking, oh, I don't know how to write a literature review paper, I don't know what I can criticize about this article, I'm just not too experienced at doing this. If you have that kind of a feeling, come to this. Look at all these slides thoroughly, and it will give you enough directions to help you go through this process of critical analysis. And once you do it once you do it twice, thrice, 4 times, 10 times, you will find that, oh, this wasn't that hard when I started off. When I first started, I thought, oh, that was really, really difficult thing to consider. But now I've done it easily and I can do it easily. So it is not any really rocket science. As long as your basics are clear, you should be able to do this easily. Now, discussion. So connect results to objective. That is the main purpose of writing a discussion. And this is another thing. A lot of early career researchers or PhD scholars, they struggle to write a very strong and powerful discussion section because they don't know what to write in the discussion. Yeah, they kind of think that I have this problem, I have solved this problem, and I've got these results. That's it. But what do these results mean? That is what goes into the discussion. Yeah. So discussion is a section where you have the opportunity to convince the reader that the results that you have found or results that you have got or gathered or collected are good. And they are the best representation or answer to the questions that you have asked. Okay. So keep that in mind very thoroughly. So I see that we are coming to close to the end of this session. I don't have enough time to go through the rest of the slides, but anyone who is interested in getting the reviewing the remaining slides, just reach out to me. These slides will be available on my website, on the Mighty Networks community that I manage. So if you're not part of the Mighty Networks community, I think I would strongly recommend you to get into that community, and you will find all the content that I'm running, that I'm covering in these webinar series for in the month of March. You will have it readily available there. And this Research Mastery webinar series is designed to cover literally everything that I can think of that researchers or PhD scholars should know, so that they can uh, do their research in a empowering way. So they don't have to think about, oh, do I know this, do I know that, what should I do next, what is this, what I'm doing is right or not. So all these kind of questions that come in students or scholars minds will be answered through this webinar series. Okay, so I will also suggest that you reach out and share this webinar series as much as possible on your social networks, and get other colleagues, other scholars to come and attend these sessions, because I think these sessions would be very powerful if they are more interactive. So if I get questions from you, I can answer and help you that way. If it is only me talking about my knowledge and my experience, it may or may not help a lot to answer the questions that you may have. So attend the sessions live, be interactive in these sessions, and get your questions answered, and do your research productively and effectively. Okay, so I think we will conclude the session today. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, leave a comment in this video. The video will be there on my YouTube channel, on my LinkedIn, on my Facebook, and on Instagram as well. So whichever social platform that you regularly use, you will find this there. Okay, so thank you very much, and I look forward to meeting you again tomorrow with another exciting topic for research. All right, thank you very much, and have a great evening. Bye.